is Jazz Day, International Jazz Day to be exact. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is that our registration for the Jazz Trombone Bootcamp is open. Can't wait to do that week, June 14th through 18th with everyone. So make sure you click that link if you're on YouTube or Facebook to go and register for that. We only have 1 or 2 more masterclass participant slots available and a lot more auditor and participant levels. There's 3 levels this year, so you can kind of fit your budget. And I'm looking forward to that. So we're going to have great guest artists. We have Steve Davis, Andre Hayward, we have Michael Davis, and Vincent Gardner. It's going to be great. So again, that's June 14th through June 18th, and we're going to be doing that on Zoom. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait for that. So if you want to get signed up, check that link out. Really one of the best trombone weeks of the year. So jazz trombone weeks, I will specify. Jazz trombone weeks of the year. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about is something that I don't always get to, and that is something I'm launching for this summer, which is a summer semester. The summer studio is open for registration. So if you want to open for summer lessons, I'm actually doing it like a package this year because sometimes you get just one lesson. It's really not enough. And sometimes you don't get, without direction and without a project, you don't really have direction for the summer. So for the summer, I'm trying to put together a package, which is like a get to know you session. And then, we'll kind of kick off with a project, and some assignments for the summer. And then we will go ahead and do 3 lessons throughout the summer. And then we'll go ahead and do a final project evaluation and get actual feedback. I'll record a video and send you some notes and stuff like that. So I'm excited about that and excited to be able to share that. So I just wanted to drop it here because it's launching. It's open now. So if you're watching the live stream, you're the first to hear about it. But there's only 5 slots. So if you're interested, sign up soon because I can only do a few lessons over the course of the summer just to keep my mind at ease. Yeah, I do in-person lessons. Just send me an email about those, nickfinzer@gmail.com. How do you balance between a firm embouchure but not too tight? I don't really think about it that way. I think about the airstream and I think about staying relaxed. I think about a great trombonist, James Burton, used to talk about, and I'm stealing this from him, he would say, make an M, and that's how it should feel. And then you blow, right? Obviously, things they change a little bit as you get to the upper register, lower register. But in general, I don't focus on the quote-unquote tightness of an embouchure. I focus on making sure that it's set, and then I focus on the airflow and air stream, air column, however you want to think about it. All of those things kind of combined. After transcribing solo, is it better to write down the solo or use computer software? You mean just like how you notate? I usually put it into the computer because my handwriting is really bad. I have written plenty down. I think it's a good practice to do it at least once, to try to do it all by hand. But some of my students are faster at writing by hand or prefer it, so we do it that way. But I always put that part at the end, the writing part. The writing part always goes to the end. The writing of the transcription down part always goes at the end. So it doesn't really matter that much, I don't think, in the scheme of things. As long as you write it down at the end after you've already internalized the transcription, I think you've already gotten a lot. What are your thoughts on music schools emphasizing academia for music students compared to students that want to teach themselves how to play the music? I don't really view it that way. I guess so I don't really think of it as one or the other. Like it's not academia or nothing. It's not teaching yourself or nothing. There are certain elements that you can learn from being in academia that you can't learn on your own because you need somebody to show you. So whether that's through a mentor or that's through academia, I think you still need that information and you need someone with that experience. You can only get so far on your own. You need someone to kind of help show you the ropes, I think. Like you don't know everything and none of us can know everything. So it's important to get that outside feedback. So for me, that's what academia is for. That's what studying with someone is for, is to get feedback, an opinion. And that's all it is. It's one opinion. You got to get a lot of opinions. I try to tell my students to get out of there. Don't stay with me forever. A couple years is enough. Go off to somebody else because I'm going to tell you the same things because my point of view is my point of view, And so you need different teachers. You need different experiences, different schools. Like different schools have different emphases in terms of the repertoire, in terms of how they organize the program, in terms of everything like that. So you have to search out what makes sense for you. And that's not going to be the same for everybody. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I mean, it's a complicated issue only in that like you need both. You can't be a successful musician with only academic learning, and you can be successful without academia for sure, but you need some kind of mentor. Like most everyone I know has some kind of mentor, I don't think there's a right should. Every student has their own way and their own path, man. Like if you have a teacher that's making you do like a preset thing, you're probably with the wrong teacher. Like, you need, there's like categories of things, of course, like things you need to do, to learn the music. You got to learn songs. You got to learn solos. You got to learn vocabulary. You got to learn the style. But you can't. It doesn't fit. The pace doesn't fit every single person. The specifics of things that they like and don't like. But like I said, like a great independently motivated student is going to be a better student at school. If you're used to that, that's what you need. I would rather somebody learn on their own, I guess, is the short answer. If I had to pick. Is there anything you wish you would have done more while you were a student at Juilliard? Yeah, there were some opportunities that I wish I had gotten while I was there in terms of what opportunities there were from the school itself. That was out of my control, though. I think if I could do anything differently, it would be changing my mindset about what it meant to go there, and that it wasn't anything more than just an entry point. It was not the, defining moment. It was not, it's not the end all be all of schools. It's not, once you go through there, you realize that the school does a lot of things to perpetuate the school, which is the same of a lot of places, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a fact. So anyway, I would have done more to just kind of get out into the scene and worry less about the school, I guess. I would have worried less about it. Who did the greats learn from? Well, they learned from the generation before them. They didn't have to go to academia. And that's what I mean when I say you've got to have a mentor of some kind to show you the ropes, someone on some instrument. It doesn't have to be trombone. It doesn't have to be formal. But you do, I think, need someone at some point to show you, those first couple guys, going all the way back to Kid Ory, whatever, they had people that they looked up to and just kind of took it the next step. So just little bits at a time, one step 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 at a time, where we've gone from Kid Ory to Michael Deese or Elliot Mason, that was a slow process. Would you consider making an album in the medium of surround sound? Sure, I would. The problem is, there's this Dolby Atmos thing that you can release, but nobody listens to that. A very, very, very small amount of people listen to it. So the amount of cost involved to do that is not worth it. Not trying to say I wouldn't do it, but it would be great. But it's not worth it if you're not already set up for it, because you have to actually be in a studio that's set up for it and format it and mix it and master it separately for surround sound, because it's more channels, right? It's not just left and right. So if people don't know, he's talking about 4 or 5 channels instead of 2, left and right. I have recorded albums that have had that option. We just released an album on the label that has it, but the process of getting that release is totally separate, and it's not worth it for the amount of people that listen that way, because most people are listening on their phones and in headphones. But I would consider it if somebody wanted to do it. I think there are some labels that specialize in doing that sort of high-end audio. Alan asks, how do you help make a student confident in the process when it takes a while to see it all come to fruition? You have to just keep reminding them. You have to get them to buy in and just bring it up again and again and again. And you just have to know that that's what it is, man. You've got to have the longevity, and you got to just show them something that happens when you do stuff little bits at a time, one step in front into the other, one transcription at a time. The next one's easier, the next one's easier, the next one's easier. But the process is super important. You have to figure out what your process is, how you're going to implement that process, creating a process that you can stick to is super important. That longevity is the most important thing, Whatever your process that you'll stick to is, then that's what you should do. That's what I think. Whether it's content, whether it's albums, whether it's recordings, whether it's videos, whether it's school, whether it's transcriptions, whether it's practicing, you have to have a practice of practice, and it's really easy to let it slip away. And, that's something that I've realized in my own life, in my practice, is that the practice of practicing has slipped away. And I've gotten into doing other things. I got into a practice of doing this every Friday because it's fun and because it allowed me to kind of connect with the audience while we were stuck at home for the last year, So it's really important. You just have to show, that's how I try to impart it on my students, is just show them. The process is ongoing. Just because I'm the professor doesn't mean that I'm not still working on stuff and having a daily practice and putting out records and putting out stuff and just doing things, I don't know. That's why I try my best to do that. How do you practice effectively? Do you plan out your practice session first? Also, do you do the same fundamentals routine every day, or do you change it up? I think it's different for different points in your development. But practicing effectively is exactly what you're saying. You need to know what you need to do before you start. So whether you plan it out in a practice journal. When I was in college, I did a practice journal all the time, and I kept that really detailed. I've got some videos on YouTube about that, so if you want to find those, and then there's links to those. There's links to a PDF of like a practice journal sample page, so you could download that. It's all free. Just go find it, and you can download it and see. That's what I would write down, like exactly what I'm doing, and plan it out. So to effectively practice, I had to find out like what was the best way to break up my practice sessions. How long was effective? I found 90 minutes is kind of the max effectiveness. 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours if I'm really focused, maybe even less now. Maybe it's more like 45 minutes to an hour, and then I got to take a break and then come back and do some more and come back and do some more. So you got to find how long you can practice for, how you're going to break up the material so that you can practice it effectively, meaning like I do technique stuff in one session, I do jazz stuff in another session. I am starting a new routine for the summer. I change it up often. When I was in college, I had a long routine. My routines come shorter and shorter. I think it's really important to have an effective, efficient routine so you can actually practice. Before I would go through an hour or 90 minutes, 2 hours of like warm up when I was at Eastman. Like I had a really, really long routine, and it was kind of silly because I was building good habits, which was great, but I was not being as effective as I could if I had found exercises that could really just be like, kill two birds with one stone, as they say. So I do a routine for a while, and then I switch it up, and then I switch it up again. But I try to make sure everything always hits all the major categories. So sound, flexibility, articulation. As long as I hit those three things, I'm not super tied to any specific exercises. And same for my students. Like, find some stuff that works for you. I like doing pitch bends. I've been really focused on developing the pedal register over the last year, 2 years. It's still not anywhere close to where I want it to be. It's better than it was a year ago, 2 years ago. It's a process. You got to stay committed to that process, man. What advice would you give to strengthen the muscles to play more sharply? I don't like that approach. That's too physical of an approach. I like to focus on air, and I like to focus on being relaxed. So if you want to play with intensity, that intensity can come from the airstream and the articulation perhaps, but I wouldn't focus on strength, because strength builds tension. In my opinion, strength builds tension. If you want to build that strength and be relaxed, that's a good idea. And to do that, I play long note melodies in the upper register. How Insensitive is one. Like you start on the high A, and they start on that high A and like build that within the realm of staying relaxed. Because if you get tense, you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to hurt your chops, you're going to hurt your development. So, and playing like sharply or playing more physically is never something I would recommend. Staying relaxed is what I recommend. For longevity, for ease of clarity, for just ease of playing, I want it to be easy. I want to just connect from here to the sound as easily as possible. Is there any jazz club you haven't gotten to perform at that you would like to or wish you had? Yeah, I mean, I would love to get to Europe and play at a bunch of the clubs there. I haven't. I've only played once at BIM House. I've never played at the North Sea Festival. I've always wanted to play at the North Sea Jazz Festival, so there's one. She says, what are your favorite standards to play in odd meter? I don't like playing standards in odd meters. There was a time and a place. I like playing It Might As Well Be Spring in 7. Like that. Because it's kind of like has that feel already anyway. But maybe I'm lying. I could get into playing standards. I have an arrangement of all the things in 5 that I kind of like. But I only like arrangements of standards and odd meters when it's like an arrangement. I don't really like just saying like, all right, let's play this in 7. It usually ends up being not very well thought out in my opinion. But if you come up with like an arrangement that's like, oh, we could do this and like have hits and like it's actually thoughtful, then I'm into it. But I just don't like saying like, oh, let's play this in 7 or this in 11. I like it much better when somebody has an arrangement. Underrated jazz records. I mean, there's so many jazz records that 90% of them are underrated. I think Duke Ellington is underrated. I think people think it's old. I think he's underrated. I was just listening to a great tune of his yesterday, Love You Madly. It's great, man. It's so happy. And just like that old stuff, the quote unquote old stuff or like the suites, I think it's all underrated. I know people say Duke Ellington a lot when they talk about influences or they talk about like important jazz musicians, but I actually don't think that many people really are into it. I think they just say it. Oh, Cabin in the Sky, Curtis Fuller. That's a record that people don't know about. That's really, really great. And oh, there's a Cannonball Adderley record called Great Love Songs, I think. It's Cannonball and Nat with an orchestra doing like studio orchestra arrangements. Question about engraving. Do you think putting a -4 or whatever above a held note indicate a release on 4 in that case is overkill, muddles up the chart visually? I suppose it could muddle up the chart visually, but if you really want it off on 4, then you should give as many instructions as possible. I don't see any problem with that. If you put it on every note, I think that would be a lot. But I would say if it's not obvious, whenever it's not obvious, I usually try to write some stuff like that. I kind of like leaving stuff up to the players unless there's some reason why I need to tell them to release on a certain beat or something, which would normally be because of like, oh, if they don't get off by 4, this voicing that comes in on 4 is going to be really weird because their notes are going to hang over or something like that. So if there's a specific reason, I would do it. Otherwise, I probably would not make a habit of it because it makes the charts, like you said, kind of messy. Everyone has opinions of this, but do you believe in the 10,000 hour rule? I don't think it's a rule. I think it's a guideline. I'm into the idea of it. I don't think it's like once you hit this number, you're good. I think you could be good at 7,000 hours or 15,000, but it does take a long time. And that's part of the practice thing, you know, the long-term view, the ongoing practice. I think it's important to give it a grain of salt. How are new genres of jazz invented, like bop, cool, jazz, fusion, etc.? They've just found new ways of expressing themselves from their current situation. So like a lot of the guys that started playing bebop came out of being in big bands and playing parts night after night after night and not getting to blow that much and improvise. And so as the improvisational skills increased, you know, they started in hotel rooms. There's like some bootleg recordings you can find of like Bird in the hotel room cats playing on suitcases and like just kind of experimenting, you know, before any of that stuff became bebop. All of that, the names for everything came afterward, and the names aren't super important. The names are just like what people in the media, jazz media or historians or whatever, decided to call stuff. Talent versus work. The word talent is one of my least favorite words in the whole English language because I think the concept of talent is a farce, and that if you are talented, that will make you successful. Talent is like a predisposition, in my opinion. Like you are talented like at something. My brother, let's use my brother. My brother is 6'11", so he did nothing to do that. He is not, you know, talented in being tall. He is tall, right? And he played basketball. So it's like you would say, oh, he's talented because he was born tall. That's kind of like, no, that just is a fact. So it's like if you have a predisposition to music, quote unquote, talent, then of course you're going to be better at music than somebody who is not predisposed or does not have talent. So talent only gets you so far, and work comes everything after that. It's skill. Yeah, the word talent really just bothers me, you know, because it's like, yes, you are talented, but the work is what makes you any great person at anything. It's the work. It's not talent. There's predisposition, but it's not. What's your opinion of the Plunger for trombones? And is there a go-to musician to listen to and emulate? And do you think we've exhausted mute types for brass? Have we exhausted mute types? No. What's my opinion of Plunger? Love the Plunger. Most people don't deal with the Plunger because I don't even know amongst my students, only some of them are interested in dealing with the Plunger, and that's okay. But let me give you a list. If you want to open horn Plunger, Al Gray. Mute Plunger, Pixie and Plunger, you got to check out Tricky Sam, you got to check out Lawrence Brown, and you got to check out Wycliffe Gordon and Steve Teray. Michael Deese does great with the Pixie and Plunger. Ed Neumeister has great Pixie and Plunger. As a teacher, do you find it hard to get students to apply the exercises you work on in lessons into their playing? Yes, I do find that to be difficult. It's not always, we don't always have time to go, and like it feels like holding their hand sometimes, you know, if you do that. And nobody wants to feel like their hand is being held, not when they're 22 years old, 25 years old, you know, you have that feeling of wanting to do it yourself. So you got to do it yourself. And it's the thing is that most things take a long time. And it could be that the things we work on in the very first semester of lessons, say as a master's student, it might literally be 2 years until like that stuff starts coming out in your playing, and you'll have already graduated by then. You know, I think about stuff that I'm practicing. There's stuff I've been practicing since undergrad. I'll give you an example. I've been trying to play and get good at playing whole step pairs of tritones. So I mean like B flat and E natural, and then F sharp and C. You could use it on like C, those two, you could use it on like C7 sharp 11, for example, or C7 flat 5. It's just a shape, right? So I've been practicing it, but to try to play it fast is really, really hard. I can play it slow, but I've literally been working on it for like 10 years and I still can't do it. And doing that in 12 keys. So it takes a long time. What does an ideal day look like in the life of Nick Finzer? Not having to wake up to an alarm. I'm not a morning person. I like being awake at night. I'm a jazz musician. So, hey, goes together, right? I mean, it's basically just being able to do what I want, just like everybody else. But yeah, things I like to do in a day would be have time to write, have time to write music, have time to practice, have time to exercise, and have a gig. Those would be a couple of the ideal day, I suppose. When you're not working on music, do you have any outside hobbies or activities you like to do to stay creative? I like to do activities that kind of clear my mind. I'm going to run a half marathon tomorrow, so I like to do stuff like that. I don't really have a lot of other hobbies. I'm keep pretty busy with teaching, performing, writing, and running the label, focusing on exercise, endurance type sport stuff, reading. The last 2 books I read was Seth Godin, The Practice, and Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday. I'm in a mission over the next period of time to do less, to focus my efforts, because sometimes they go this way, and I always talk about go deep, not wide, and sometimes I go wide accidentally just because I'm like, oh yeah, let's do this, and so things kind of go like that, and I have to like actively take the role to like pull it back together. So that I'm in a pull it together moment here. And how do you teach students to transcribe, especially younger kids who don't think they can do it? By giving them small pieces of transcriptions to do, by giving them a transcription that's actually within their wheelhouse. It's not going to push them too far out. It's something that's short. So like 1 chorus of blues, perhaps. I like to start people with Miles Davis on So What, because there's not a lot of chord changes. You can be like, all right, it's all the white notes on the piano, so figure that out. Maybe in a couple of exceptions, and you have to create that momentum of success. So like, for example, even if you give them something harder, like Curtis Fuller Blue Train, I always say just leave the hard part out. Leave the double time out. Do everything but the double time, and we'll come back to the double time later. Because there's no reason why you can't come back later. People get hung up on some hard part of a transcription. Or like when I tell students to maybe go transcribe another instrument, like Jackson, he's going to go on a journey of transcribing some Freddie Hubbard. But when you get to a spot that's too hard, or it's too high, or it's some like weird trumpet trick, you got to just either figure something out to take its place, or just leave it out because it's not that important. You've gotten 80% of the information. That last 20% should not stop you. Okay, Jack says, why does every lead sheet of impressions say the chords are D minor 7 and E flat minor 7? There's a G in the bass on like every single downbeat in the A section, both the live and studio recordings. Explain this. Somebody wrote it down. There's an interesting podcast about the real book on 99% Invisible. Maybe you've seen this. They talk about the origins of the real book from some Berkeley students in the 70s. My guess is that is the answer to the question, is that it became codified in that way. Would you prefer that it was written as G7 or like G sus, like D minor 7 over G? But I also think maybe Miles just said just play D Dorian or like C major or circled around D. I don't know. You'd have to ask Ron Carter. Maybe we should try to ask Ron Carter. He's been doing some Q&As during this quarantine. This is a really different opinion for some people, but do you think that the real book is as unreliable as some people say it is? The answer depends on how true to the original you want to be, and how informed you want to be, and how much the details matter to you. The details matter a great deal to me, and they are something that I focus on in my playing, something I focus on in my musicianships, that taking care of the details matters, and that's one of the most important, like essential things to me in studying music. So to me, the real book is unreliable because of that reason, that they did not deal with the details and they rushed through a lot of it, and then it just became codified in a way, like we were just talking about, that might not be correct. There's a lot of it that is correct, of course. They arbitrarily selected versions of songs to be the definitive version when maybe that's not the definitive version for me. So I prefer to learn tunes from recordings because that means that you can learn different versions, I was talking about this in the masterclass we did on Monday. Just like there's no such thing as the changes when you think about a tune that's now part of the canon. Like there are the quote unquote original changes, but after that, it's like there's always a range of options that are possible. Like you're moving between key centers and you can freely do that. You can freely move between the key centers and you can get there with tritone substitutions, different substitutions, diminished substitutions, all these different things. So I try to not think of the changes, especially when I'm thinking about a tune like a songbook tune. Because like Miles Davis or whoever who played it originally was already reharming those tunes. So the real book is just a guide. So always check the real book. I would always check the recordings because you might discover that the real book just has a different set of changes. Not that it's quote unquote wrong. I just threw them all away because number one, they're really big. I guess they're probably all on PDF now, but when you used to have to buy them and carry them around, they were really big and heavy. I mean, I don't know if I would say I despise it. I would say it can be a good jumping off point, but you always got to check it. Did you check the changes, or like where did you get those from? Because it's the same on the iReal app. It's not just the real book. Like it's just versions of changes. For example, recently I was working on Conception, that tune. And if you look at all these different versions and listen to them, they all have different changes. And that's okay. But like the changes that are in the iReal app, you might have to change them because they're not to what you learned, you know? So you have to learn from recordings. You have to develop that skill to be able to hear harmony. I think that's a very important skill to develop. It's a difficult one to develop, but you definitely should work on it. I would not say that you can be, there's going to be a cap. There's going to be a ceiling to what you can do because you can't hear what's going on if you can't hear harmony as well as melody. And especially that even goes if you have perfect pitch. Like if you can't hear the harmony because you're hearing the notes, like that's also problematic. I've worked with students in the past who have perfect pitch and they hear they can hear the colored tones or they hear the notes, but they have no idea what the harmony is, and they can like mimic it and like go to like a note or something like that. But you have to be able to hear the harmony. That's all the colors together, right? The aggregate of all the colors together. So wouldn't say that I despise the real book. I would say it's better for your education to do it. It's a shortcut, and you're better not taking the shortcut. It's better the hard way, do it the hard way. It's going to be better for you in the long run. You get to choose one. Elliot Mason playing bassoon, Marshall Gilkes playing clarinet, or Slide Hampton playing flute. Who are you choosing? Actually, there's some good trombone players that play flute as well. I don't know why, especially in the Latin scene, like they double flute and trombone, which is kind of crazy, right? I would like to see Marshall playing clarinet. That was my choice. If you had to travel back in time and jam with a jazz trombone player and do a duet together, who would it be and why? Well, it would be JJ because he's my hero. I would also like to do it with Lawrence Brown because he was a virtuoso of his time, and I think he would have a lot to offer from a much different perspective. It would be interesting to try to learn from someone who didn't have the perspective of the last 70 years of music and just the pre-1950s version of whatever the scene was. If you could go back to your time at Eastman, what would you want to do more of? I've answered this question before, and what I usually say is spend more time cultivating relationships and not just being locked in a practice room, because I just locked myself in the practice room and killed myself with work the whole time. I had like a 15 student studio. I was gigging 5 or 6 nights a week. I was teaching all day on Saturdays. I was doing a lot of other teaching stuff. Like I was just like burying myself. And so I would do more to go back and connect with the people that I actually went to school with. I didn't connect with the people I went to school with till after we finished, really. The social aspect is really important. Like the people that you're at school with are going to be people that are the beginnings of your community in whatever town you move to. It's pretty important. It's pretty essential. This is an easy answer. What do you shed when you have minimal time? Long tones, lip slurs, pitch bends, anything that's only fundamentals focused. Like what is the few things that I can do in this short amount of time that are going to set me up for success in the gigs that I have to do? Do you double instruments? What's your opinion of doubling brass instruments? It's great. It's good for working. You have to do it on Broadway. I've done it myself. Yes, bass trombone. Yes, tuba. No French horn, no trumpet. I don't like playing those. I can go bigger. I can't go smaller, really. And I've done it. I've done it on Broadway. Is it my favorite thing to do? No. I prefer my musical path is not to be I don't necessarily want to just be a freelancer playing any type of gig for any situation. Of course, I love to just play, of course, and do many, many, many things in different areas. But like, if I think like, what is the thing that I'm trying to do? I'm trying to play creative music and improvise and like be an improviser. And that's my focus. That's not my focus to like just play any gig for any situation, you know. I'm happy to do it, and I'm very grateful for all the times I've gotten to do that, but I'm just saying, like, that's not, if I have to think about where I'm going, it's not my focus, and doubling is not my focus. I've done it plenty though. Have you made progress on drums? I'm about the same. I can still just like barely play. I need to get my hands back together because I used to play more like rudiment stuff. I got to get that back together, because when I just like having like a concept that's too far ahead of your skills is really bad, because when I hit the drums, it sounds so bad that I just don't want to keep on playing, you know, because I know what it's supposed to sound like, you know, just like, you know, so many other people, you know what it's supposed to sound like. So then you like go and you do it, and then it's like, oh my God, that sounds terrible. And what percentage of your listening do you reckon is music you don't like / are listening to for context of the genre and history, and not necessarily because you enjoy it? Recently, that's the majority of my listening, is I'm checking out what everyone's doing, what the industry is putting out. Like I've listened this morning to whatever was on the Spotify State of Jazz playlist, all new jazz playlists, Apple Music Currents, all those type of things. Because I got to know what people are doing. I want to know what people are doing, stay on top of it. So most of the time, I'm just going to pitch one more time. If you are a trombonist looking for something fun to do this summer, June 14th through 18, Jazz Trombone Bootcamp. DJ, who's on here, will be helping us again and with the camp. And then also I launched just today, you guys are the first to know, just the summer studio for 2021. So you can find more information out about that. Just go to my store. Coming up with a plan for the summer, and having some evaluations, and really kind of digging in, creating a plan for the summer, because it's can be a lot of like free time to do stuff you meant to be doing all along, or you can kind of just get lost in everything that you're supposed to be doing. So I encourage you to check that out if you want. He says, any opinions on ergonomic tools to hold the trombone? I haven't had too many issues yet, so I haven't explored very many of them. I think you have to do what you need to do. You got to make sure that you don't have too much tension. So if they help alleviate the tension, then I'm all for it. I know, you know, when you hold the bass trombone for a long time, that strap sometimes can be really helpful at like alleviating stuff. And my time with Steve Teray, he, you know, makes these hand grips that make it a little easier to kind of grip your horn. He custom makes them with plastic, and kind of to grip onto the horn and just be a little more comfortable. So I think if it helps you, then it's great, man. Okay, thanks everybody for joining this week. Hope you have an amazing weekend, and we'll be back next Friday with another edition of our Q&A. And until then, happy practicing, and we'll see you next time.